Complaints filed against Senator Brian Boquist will be discussed by the Senate Special Committee on Conduct Monday morning. The complaints stem from two comments he made. One was directed at Senate President Peter Courtney on the Senate floor back on June 19th.
And you send the state police to get me, hell's coming to visit you personally.
The other was to KGW's Pat Doris that same day. Boquist referring to Oregon State police troopers being sent to find the senators who walked out.
Send bachelors and come heavily armed. I'm not going to be a political prisoner in the state of Oregon.
An outside law firm was called to look into these comments. The law firm then issued this memo saying the comments constitute, quote, credible threats of violence directed at the Senate president and the Oregon State Police. It goes on to say reports are that people are fearful and scared to come to work. As a result, the law firm recommended Senator Boquist be removed from the workplace. At Monday's hearing, the committee, made up of 2 Democrat and 2 Republican senators, will review the law firm's findings and decide what happens next. Political scientist Jim Moore is skeptical anything will happen.
If something's going to happen with Boquist, it'd have to be a lot of evidence. The Republicans would have to be virtually unanimous on it as well. And then he would leave. And at this point, this seems way too political for that to happen.
Moore thinks Boquist's comments may not be viewed as threats, but as protected political speech.
This is a kind of off-the-cuff remark by somebody who is really angry. And when you look at it, he shouldn't have said that. He just shouldn't have said that. But he did. And so now the Senate has to say, did you cross boundaries?
For example, Moore notes if the committee makes a recommendation for Boquist to be reprimanded or expelled, the entire Senate would then have to vote on it.
I have a feeling the committee's going to be under a fair amount of pressure unless there's some really strong stuff to say we need to just move beyond this.
The committee will also review dozens of letters people submitted in support of Senator Boquist, as well as documents Boquist submitted himself. I did reach out to him today for comment. We exchanged a few emails. He said he will send out a statement in the morning. Back to you.